Guys, you have no idea how exciting this moment is. It is the first night of the fantasy football playoffs. If you are doing it the right way, at least. If you are in week 15 and it's your second week of the playoffs, I implore you, once again, to change that next year because this is when playoffs should start for fantasy football. I'm psyched about tonight, and I don't even feel like it's going to be that good of a game, but there's definitely a lot to talk about. But we're going to start out tonight by doing a team breakdown. So for those of you who don't know, I do team breakdowns all throughout the year to make sure that I'm getting you guys on the right track to win a championship in fantasy football. And that's what we're going to do tonight for Mr. Alex LaHood. So Alex, I appreciate you reaching out and letting me offer you a team breakdown. And if you do want a team breakdown, we'll go through how you can get one after I do this team breakdown for Alex. But just to make it clear before I start this team breakdown, this is a Q&A chat. It will just be questions after the team breakdown. So make sure to stay tuned for afterwards. So we're going to go ahead and look at Alex's team right here. So he's got Joe Burrow, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Emeka Egbuka, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Trey McBride, Travion Henderson, Seahawks defense, and Brandon Aubrey at kicker. Then on his bench, he's got Jacoby Brissett, Jackson Dart, Mike Evans, Harold Fannin, Bam Knight, Broncos defense, Eagles defense, and Jaden Daniels. Now, this does appear to be a one-quarterback league, so here are some league settings and notes. It is a 10-team league. It is a full PPR. Playoffs start this week. You're in the playoffs with no bye week. And what you had included to me on the email, Alex, was that you'll notice that I have no healthy backup wide receivers and instead have running backs, defenses, and quarterbacks. I believe these positions to be harder to come by, so I am using waivers for wide receiver depth. There are decent options on the wire for free, including Addison, Pierce, Franklin, Higgins, AD, and more. My league is negligent and barely pays attention to the wire unless they have an injury or need a defense. The top two teams have terrible quarterback rooms, so I am playing defense by holding Dart, Daniels, and Jacoby. Also worried about Burrow being injured. So this is good context, and this is always something that I appreciate when I'm doing a team breakdown on someone's team. Is give me as much context as you can, because like the first thing I'm looking at when I see this lineup is how many quarterbacks you have. I mean, you've got Burrow obviously in your starting spot. You've got Jacoby Brissett. You've got Jackson Dart. That's 3. And then we've got Jaden Daniels on the IR. So that's 4 total quarterbacks. Ordinarily, I'm not going to tell anyone to house 2 quarterbacks, let alone 3 or 4. So it's good to hear this context because it does make sense. You are playing keep away from the rest of your league who desperately needs quarterbacks because you're hogging them. And same thing with defense. You've got 3 defenses, and I would argue you really only need to keep the Seahawks. Like the Seahawks defense, to me, moving forward in the playoffs, is one of those defenses I want to ride with. Really quick, Football de Noche, appreciate your super chat. I see it. Like I said, I'm doing the team breakdown first, and then we'll get to questions after the team breakdown. So yeah, this Seahawks defense, to me, that's the defense that you would need. Because, you look at week 16, right? After you play the Colts with the Seahawks defense this week, then the Seahawks get to play the Rams. That's not an ideal matchup, but I think they can do it. And then week 17, if you just hold on for a week, that's when they get to play the Panthers. So I don't really see a matchup I want to really avoid. The Rams are definitely one I would say if you can't avoid, maybe you could try to avoid it. But I will say that the Eagles, who are they playing next week? The Commanders. So the Eagles honestly might be a good one to hold on to. The Broncos, I've said this for a while, like they've got tough matchups in the playoffs. The only reason they're in my top 12 rankings for playoffs is because their defense has been very good. So I don't love the Broncos as much as I love the Colts, as much as I love the Seahawks and I love the Eagles. So again, if you were to drop a defense, I would say drop the Broncos. If you were in need, and if you need to drop a quarterback, I mean, as much as I love Jaden, like if somebody, the easiest thing for me to do would be if someone gets injured, you just go ahead and drop Jaden, and then you put someone else in the IR slot. Like Jaden at this point, I don't think is going to be in good position. And he may not even come back. But I don't want to change. Like, I'm not here to even like argue with you on this one. I get your concerns here, and I get your strategy. Like, your league being negligent, barely playing the waivers. They need quarterbacks, so I get it. The top two teams have terrible quarterback rooms. Your strategy makes sense. So, since you provided me this context, I'm not even going to argue with you, because context really is the most important thing when it comes to answering one of these team breakdowns, because there's so much at play in everyone's individual league that I don't know, right? Like, I don't know Jeff, your league mate Jeff. He may be more of a cautious guy who likes to have, 3 quarterbacks in your league. So to me, it makes more sense to load up on other positions to keep them away from him, and vice versa. So I really do think that, providing this context is key, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, there's way too many quarterbacks on this roster, especially since it's not a super flex league. But it makes sense what you're saying. So I don't have a problem with what you're doing right now. It's working. You're in the playoffs. You also added you're slightly worried you're betting on the Bucks, Bengals, and Cardinals too much. A single NFL game could make or break my year. But also the trade deadline is passed, so not many other options. We'll have to account for this next year. Yeah, I think, listen, my thought process on loading up on teams is I don't get too concerned unless I'm like real heavy. And usually I just don't find myself in that position. So it's nothing I have to like cautiously work against, right? Like last year, I loaded up on Dolphins players. I had Tyreek Hill. A lot of places I had Devon Achane, a lot of places. So I get it. But at the same time, like when it comes to the Cardinals, for example, the key here is you've got the best option, right? Like Trey McBride is the best option in fantasy for the entire Cardinals team. So it's not like you're sitting here thinking to yourself, man, I don't know, like, should I move off of Trey McBride? No one, first of all, you're not going to trade him, and you're definitely not going to drop him. So, like, it doesn't make sense to be all worried about having Trey McBride. Now, having someone like Jacoby Brissett has actually done very well for the majority of the season. So, I really do think you don't have to worry about it. I mean, Bam Knight is, again, one of those guys that could be useful on a lot of rosters. And I don't think that you need to worry about having to put Bam Knight in, because you've got 3 running backs in your starting lineup already with Henderson at the flex, and you've got Bucky Irving and Chase Brown. So I don't think you need to worry about that. Bam is a good RB4, so you can keep holding Bam. The Bengals players, I will say this, like the Bengals, to me, are probably one of my favorite teams to have fantasy options with when Joe Burrow's healthy. Like, a healthy Burrow is a great quarterback start, and he's got great matchups upcoming. And Chase Brown has been involved enough from a pass-catching perspective for me to not feel like I need to worry about this one. So I don't really look at it and think to myself the same thing that you do. I get where you're coming from because you don't want to be super heavy. The Bucks, you've got Mike Evans, you've got Emeka Egbuka, and Bucky Irving. That, to me, is probably the biggest concern because, like, for example, this week, Mike Evans being back, right? I'm not going to play Mike Evans with your lineup. I'm going to stick with what you've got. Like, when I'm looking at your lineup here, I'm not going to make a change. You've got a good lineup here with all these guys. There's nothing that I would change personally about this lineup either this week, with the exception of, not even. No, I forgot about Burrow. I was going to say Dart should be in your lineup, but you've got Burrow there. So I wouldn't make a change. So, like, your lineup this week is set. And I do think that the upside of having a guy like Egbuka is still good. And you're not going to drop any of these guys. Like, that's the reality is there's no one on your team aside from the quarterbacks and the defenses that I would look to and say drop. Like, you're not going to drop Mike Evans. You're not going to drop Fannin. You're not going to drop Bam Knight. I could see myself dropping the Broncos defense. I could see myself dropping Jaden Daniels in a heartbeat. I could see myself dropping Brissett if I needed the extra space. But in reality, I get where you're coming from. Like, you're playing strategy here. Your league mates are negligent. the top two teams have terrible quarterback rooms, so you're playing keep away. It's all based on strategy, and it makes a lot of sense what you're doing. You also added you will likely drop the Eagles defense for Burden or Higgins at 12:59 Eastern on Sunday. I just dropped Benson for Fannin. Now, that might be the only thing that I recommend is maybe instead of dropping the Eagles, drop the Broncos. Because, like I said, the only thing I can poke a hole in with the Broncos is the Broncos next week, they play the Jags. So I don't really trust that matchup as much as I trust the Eagles matchup. The Eagles, they get to play the Commanders, right? And that's with or without Jaden Daniels at this point, a really good matchup. So I think if I was you, that's maybe the only piece of advice I would give you to change something. Like your philosophy, your strategy is pretty bulletproof as far as I'm concerned. Outside of that, that's the only move I would probably end up making. And I don't disagree with the move. I think you should drop one of those defenses for those wide receivers. But I will say this. I think that the defense you should drop is probably the Broncos. And if I had to choose, I would pick up Luther Burden probably. I think he probably has the quickest and easiest path to upside of these next couple weeks than Higgins does. Unless you're talking about T. Higgins, which I can't imagine you are. I would imagine you're talking about Jaden Higgins. But other than that, man, there's really nothing else to talk about. I mean, your matchup or your lineup is perfect. There's nothing I would change here as far as what you've got. And you're also just in position to where I feel like you have enough depth if one of your guys gets hurt, particularly at quarterback. I mean, you've got a tremendous amount of depth. If Burrow goes down again, you've got guys. And then your wide receiver position, you've got Evans. If one of those guys goes down, you'll get Luther Burden or Jaden Higgins. And then you've also got running back depth. Like, you have so much depth on your side that this team feels like it's ready to make a run for the championship. Like, I don't care. Like, bye weeks are cool. But in reality, I've actually always been – I'm a kind of superstitious fantasy player. Like, I don't always love bye weeks. I think it's a little overrated because sometimes on your bye week, let's say your starting lineup goes off for 190 points. Well, you didn't get to utilize it. And then the next week they come back and they give you 110. And you lose by like 5. So I'm not always the biggest fan of bye weeks personally, but I mean, I think this team is in position, so don't worry about anything. I get your strategy. I like it, and you know your league better than I know it, so I appreciate the context, and that's the only move I would tell you to make is maybe swap out the Eagles with the Broncos because you may want to look into benching the Seahawks next week, and you probably would want to go with the Eagles to supplement rather than the Broncos. So, again, Alex, appreciate you giving me the opportunity to break down your team. And if you guys are interested in a team breakdown, you can go to our site, fsroundup.com, and then go to the team breakdown tab. And once you send me an email with your roster, give me as much context as you can. And once your payment goes through, I will break down your team on a live stream just like I did tonight. So appreciate it again. All right, now let's get into the questions tonight. I appreciate everyone's patience. We've got some super chats loaded up, so we're going to go ahead and start going through things as fast as possible. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well to show your support. Football the Noche, what's going on? My boy Egbuka or Jacoby, I can't miss. PPR week 15. We're all in that same position, man. Listen, you know what's funny? Before I answer this, I was thinking about it today. Like, it's so fun because in y'all's position, you have someone to blame, me, if I get it wrong and you play the way I play it, right? So it's like in my position, I get a lot of like slings and arrows. I'm okay with it because all I'm trying to do is give my best opinion on what you should do. So here's the thing with Egbuka, right? Egbuka has been getting targets, and I've been highlighting this with him. All of his targets have still been there. Now, with Mike Evans back, I actually think it helps him rather than hurts him because there's going to be pressure taken off of him. So I could see a world where Egbuka does well tonight. Am I going to tell you to play him over someone I view as the clear wide receiver one? I probably won't. Like, if it was me, I would be playing Jacoby Myers, and they're very close. They are very close. Like, let's line this up in the comparison feature. I definitely could see a world where Egbuka goes off tonight. I would personally like to see it. I just don't trust it. So Jakobi Meyers is 6 spots ranked above Egbuka in my rankings, and the comparison feature chooses Jakobi Meyers based off a couple different factors. I just think that when you look at it, Myers makes the most sense because he has become the wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville, and he's not dealing with as much competition. Like, in theory, yeah, he's got Brian Thomas Jr. there, first-round draft pick. He's got Brenton Strange there, but that's not how the cookie has crumbled since Jakobi Meyers has been there. Egbuka, he's been getting targets, but it hasn't worked. So I think I'd rather just stick with what's working right now, and that's Jakobi Meyers. So that's my play. But I will be honest, it's close enough to be a gut call. So if you do disagree with me strongly, do not be afraid to go with your gut on this one. Appreciate the super chat and your patience. Next one up, we had Fish Clinic. What's going on? Egbuka, Devonta Smith, Luther Burden, or Chuba Hubbard? Pick 2, full PPR. Egbuka will go in this circumstance because I have more trust in him than Chuba and Luther Burden this week. Luther Burden is actually pretty decently ranked for me this week, but it's like I just said with Egbuka. I do see this as a potential big game. In certain circumstances, I will tell people to play Egbuka. Not in all circumstances, because he's been too bad lately over the last 2 months for me to just say, lock him in. I mean, lock him in your lineup. I've been a big Egbuka guy all year, and I've been turning on him lately. So I've got to be honest, he's not the perfect play. Not a must-start by any means, but yeah, I think he's got a lot of potential tonight. More than Chuba does, more than Burden does. Chuba's, of course, a scary play like I discussed last night, but realistically, I don't think he has the upside of Egbuka, even if he is the RB1. So I'll play Egbuka for sure, and then I'll also play Devonta Smith. And I get it. Like, this one definitely feels like one of those moments where you could be relying on 2 boomer bust plays. But if you just look at it from the other perspective, Luther Burden is not even boomer bust. Like, he hasn't done what he did in the first I think it was week 4 or something like that he had a big game. And people were like, oh, Luther Burden season. He hasn't done that. He's been involved enough to be relevant as a flex option, especially without Rome. But it's a brutal weather game, and I don't think that he has a 20-point ceiling like both those guys do. And then Chuba Hubbard, I just can't trust him. I can't trust this offense. I can't trust it enough to play over a guy like that. So I'm going to go ahead and play Egbuka, and I'm going to go ahead and play Devonta Smith. Appreciate the super chat. All right, let's go through. Ignacio Macias, what's going on? At wide receiver, pick 1. Judy, Pearsall, Egbuka, and Boutte. Pick 1. This is another scenario where it makes sense to play Egbuka to me. Because, let me just put it another way. Egbuka has been bad the last 2 months. Yes, but his target share has been steady. And with Mike Evans back, I argue that it makes it better for him because it takes pressure off of him. So, in my opinion, with the upside that he has, which is 22 plus, with the floor that he has being lower, let's line him up against Judy. Judy's upside is not 22. Judy's upside is probably 16 to 17 in this game, in this weather, and in this condition in Chicago this week. And his floor is basically around the same. And then you look at the next guy, Ricky Pearsall, we have not seen any remote upside. So he's not even close. Keishawn Boutte, I like him, but his floor is low because his target share is low. And his ceiling is not that high because the target share is also low. So this is one of those where it's there's a line. There's a line with all these players who are struggling. Like Justin Jefferson, there's a line for him too. But at Egbuka, his line is even more defined than JJ's because the targets are still there. So I'm going to go with Egbuka. Appreciate the super chat. Gyro C7. What's going on? Start 1 quarterback, Hurts or Stafford. Half PPR start 4, BTJ, Egbuka, Devonta Smith, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Jordan Mason, Blake Corum. Kicker, Bates or Loop. Defense, Niners, Panthers, or Dallas. Okay, let's go through the quarterbacks. Hurts or Stafford. It's a relatively easier one for me. They're both in the same tier. If you didn't watch the quarterback and tight end rankings video yet, go back and watch that after this live stream. That came out probably about 2 hours ago, so it's not been that long. So you may not have seen it. They're in the same tier. I'm going with Matt Stafford, though, pretty easily because I just think that at this point, what we've seen with Matt Stafford is a guy that you just want to continue to ride the wave with. This does feel like his last big year in fantasy, and he's been so dominant, and the matchup this week against Detroit's defense is so good. With Hurts, even in a good matchup, I could see how this one becomes a run-heavy game script, right? I think that Hurts is in really big trouble. While I'm not predicting that Hurts is going to be a disaster again, I think Hurts will be much better this week. I am predicting that Hurts could be in a game script which favors the run. So I'm going to go ahead and play Stafford, but I don't think Hurts is a bad play. Pick 4, Devontae Adams is definitely going in. Egbuka will be the next in line to go in. Then it will be Devonta Smith. And then I'll play BTJ. And the reason why is because if you've looked at the last several games, no, his target share is not really his targets went up this past week, right? He got 6 targets, and the first week he came back, he only had 3. So they doubled the targets for him. He's also been efficient on his work. Look at this. 2 catches for 28 yards. And then the next week, he comes out and gives 3 catches for 87. So my opinion on what Jacksonville's doing with him is they're doing kind of this slow build-up to making him the player that he once was. And maybe, I'm not saying that's going to work out, but what I am telling you is that I think that we could be in position here with a guy like that to where he kind of comes on at the right time like he did last year. So I think BTJ is a better play than Stephon Diggs, who has a low floor. And I get it. The ceiling is probably higher, but BTJ's matchup is really one I want to take advantage of. Jordan Mason, I would rather play BTJ. I think the upside is higher, and Corum, I think his upside is higher than Corum's. I think Corum last week was really a game script thing. He obviously has been involved, but I think the degree of involvement was game script dependent. They were crushing the Cardinals. So I'll probably go ahead, play Egbuka, Devonta Smith, Devontae, and BTJ. Kicker, Bates or Loop. I'll go with Loop. And I saw someone comment I'm a Bates hater. I have no hatred for Jake Bates. That's so stupid. Jake Bates just hasn't been good enough consistently. Loop, the last 6 or 7 weeks since Lamar's been back has been really good in fantasy. He's given you consistently 9 to 13 to 14 points sometimes. Jake Bates has matchups where, you'd think they'd be good, but Detroit goes for it a lot. That's why I've never really liked a kicker for Detroit, because this is a team that rolls the dice, man. They're a dice rolling team, and I love that about them, but it's not exactly good for a kicker in fantasy. So I'd rather go ahead and play Loop in this matchup. And then, because they're both high-scoring games, too. So I'll go with Loop. I had a lot of questions about the Niners' defense this week. I understand it. They, in theory, have a great matchup, but at the same time, I don't love it. Their defense has had a non-existent pass rush. They have not made as many plays necessary for fantasy football, so I don't love their defense. And the Titans looked a little better last week offensively. So I don't love the Niners defense. The Panthers or the Cowboys feels like a better play. This is – I'm kind of curious, Gyro, if you're in here still. And I want to know if you watch my defense rankings, because they will clearly answer the question. Not that I'm not okay with you asking me this question tonight. Of course I'm okay with it. But what I'm trying to get at is that it kind of seems like your gut is telling you the 49ers are a better play. Listen, I have no problem with you going with the 49ers. I don't think they're going to be a bad play. Like, they're not that far outside of my top 30 this week, or top 30. Yeah, that'd be a problem. They're not that far outside my top 12 this week because I don't think they're a bad play. But I would rather take the upside of the Panthers, who are playing the Saints, when the Saints turn the ball over and they don't score many points. Like, last week was one of their better weeks offensively, and they still only put up 24 points on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it's not like they're a high-flying offense. So I do think that it is just one of those scenarios where if you really, really feel like the gut call of, like, your gut is really telling you to go with the 49ers defense, I'm not going to fight you on it, but I'm just giving you my reasoning of why I'd play the Panthers and the Cowboys over them. So I'd personally go with the Panthers. I think that was everything you asked. Appreciate the super chat. M. Kells, what's going on? Thinking starting Mariota over Mahomes. DBO at wide receiver 3. Debo, yeah. Listen, I don't have a problem playing with the stack upside, but understand this. A Washington stack is not exactly one you want to, like, put your trust and faith in during the fantasy playoffs. It could go well. It's the Giants. That matchup is excellent. I'm big on the matchup. And Mariota's not poorly ranked. Like, he is not. If you go to my site, fsroundup.com, and you go to my rankings with a premium subscription, you'll know he's not poorly ranked. Like, he's right there in that top 16. However, if it was me, I'm going Mahomes. Because two reasons why. I think Mahomes is the better play this week because he is been mostly good in fantasy this year. Like, and I'm talking like mostly 20 plus points. Right? Mariota has had a couple of those games. He's never been bad, but he's only had a couple of like 20 to 22 plus games. On top of that, like I just said, when I think of the playoffs, I think of guys like the stacks that I would want to ride with, right? Like, I would want to ride with Mahomes and Rashee Rice. I want to ride with Puka and Matt Stafford. I want to ride with Dak and CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens. The Washington stack, like, even if you had Terry, it would be better. Debo and Mariota does not feel like a stack I want to die with. Like, that feels like one of those stacks where I'm like, I'm actually kind of trying to avoid that stack right there. I get it. Stacks are good for fantasy. I'm always big on stacks. This doesn't feel like the week, though. Even though it's a good matchup, I would personally advise against it. But go with your gut. Appreciate the super chat. Misab123, what's going on? Seahawks over Texans with Rivers back. Still struggling on playing Egbuka or McLaurin. I don't know if Higgins is going to be back or he would start. So the second question, I know I answered this earlier because you're in kind of a tough position, right? Because the drop-off from T to Terry, I think, is pretty significant. But I will say this, Terry is definitely he's definitely a good play this week. The matchup is really good, and Mariota has been fine for Terry when they've played together. So I'm not exactly like fearful of that prospect of it because I think that Terry's upside is where Buka's is this week. And I would say T has higher upside than both of them. So I don't know if T's going to be back or not either. Let's check his practice report today. Another limited practice. So, I mean, he very well could play at this point. Having 2 straight limited practices is definitely encouraging. So, if it was me personally, I would roll the dice and try to see if I can get T, because I think T is a much better play than Egbuka. I think he's a much better play than Terry, but I will say this. Having Terry versus Egbuka is so close to me that it doesn't feel wildly off. Like, it doesn't feel like that's a risk I'm not willing to take. But you have to understand, I'm a risk taker. In life, I always take risks. In fantasy football, I always take risks. Because I want the payoff. I want the big payoff. I'm not afraid of risk. So If you're a more risk-averse person, I'm okay with you going with Egbuka tonight, but understand the risk with Egbuka because Egbuka is not a safe play. He can either give you 4 points tonight or he could give you 24. So, like, to me, I'd rather just wait and try to play T and not, if I don't play T, I'll play Terry in a really good matchup. That's what I would do personally. And then the defenses, the Seahawks over the Texans, yeah, I would do that. They're both great defenses. They're both the top two options, in my opinion, this week. But for me personally, like, I've been praising the Texans defense for a while. I don't think people understand. And I don't think I've given it enough credit for what it is. The Texans defense, guys, is probably one of the best NFL defenses that I have seen in many, many years. And I'm not joking about this. Their defense from top to bottom is stacked. Well, guess what? The Seahawks are actually right there with them this year. But the Seahawks, and the difference between them is the Seahawks defense for fantasy has been awesome. They're outscoring the Texans by about 30 points this year. So from a fantasy perspective, the Seahawks are making more plays that count for fantasy upside than the Texans. So from that perspective, the Seahawks are better. They both have great matchups. I would rather play the old grandpa quarterback than Jacoby Brissett, who has had some upside. And the only thing I've said that could derail the Texans' play this week is if they get garbage time points, which is very possible because that's what they've been. They've been garbage time junkies. So, yeah, I'll take the Seahawks. Appreciate the super chat. Alias, what's going on? Sit one. Bam, Debo, Worthy, Trey Tucker, and Jaden Higgins. You know, it's really interesting. Actually, I was about to say I would play Jaden Higgins over Bam, and I would do that. And the reason why is because the matchup for both of them is complete polar opposite. They're playing each other, but Jaden Higgins against the Cardinals defense, that's a beautiful matchup. And Bam playing the Texans defense is like hell on earth. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. So I don't want to play Bam particularly, but I'll play him over Trey Tucker. Guys, Alias, I know you're a Raiders fan. I hate it when I have to do this because it's not an attack on you, man. Like, you seem like a great guy. But at the same time, like, I just look at this and I say to myself, oh, man, I don't think I can do it. Like, I can't not take a dump on them. So the Raiders with Kenny Pickett, they're about to be worse than Geno Smith. And they're playing the Eagles. Think of what think of what Ladd McConkey just did against the Eagles. Nothing. I mean, he did nothing for them. And Cooper DeJean is going to lock up Trey Tucker even worse this week. So Trey Tucker, to me, I'm staying far away from him any week, but especially this week. So that's a pretty easy one. Appreciate the super chat. All right, we got a new member at FS Roundup, and they get priority. Account 84, appreciate you becoming a member over here. I don't see a question from you, I don't think. If you want to put a question, you're more than welcome to. I don't see anything. Maybe I'm missing something. But I greatly appreciate you becoming a member over here, that's for sure. So if you do have a question you want to ask, then I will definitely get that answered for you. But appreciate you becoming a member over here. Next up, we had Joseph Zock. What's going on? Who you got, Pitts or Fannin? Pretty easily Fannin for me. People have been asking about Pitts. I've been watching the comments roll in about Pitts. I don't think Pitts is a bad play. It just comes down to situations I like better. Like, guys, I think that people just get the recency bias and they want to like say, oh, it's all Pitts, baby. Pitts to the moon. Guys, Kirk Cousins, I don't know how many times I have to say this, is Mermaid Man. And I don't know if people really recognize that reference. There's an episode of SpongeBob where they're like trying to fight off the dirty bubble and Barnacle Boy, and then Mermaid Man just like falls over backwards. Like, that's what Kirk Cousins is. He's so bad at this point in his career. I'll take you back to 2 weeks ago. Yeah, Pitts had a good week this past week, but week 13, no, it wasn't week 13. Week 12, he had a bad game, and he was targeted 5 times. Like, this offense sucks. So I get it. Like, I'm not saying Pitts is a bad play. I'm not here to say that. All I'm trying to do is give context and say why I would personally play Fannin over him, because Fannin, to me, has evolved into the tight end one in Cleveland. And I would also add this, like, the whole thing with this offense is predicated on Kirk Cousins being able to deliver the ball, and he can't do that consistently. Shedeur Sanders can. Like, Shedeur Sanders is a better player at this point in time than Kirk Cousins. So I think that what we've seen with with Harold Fannin, with Shedeur, has been a solidified floor, and Kyle Pitts doesn't have that. And Harold Fannin also has more upside. So I would personally take Fannin. Appreciate the super chat. All right, I see we got the question in from our member here. Appreciate that. PPR, Mike Evans or Khalil Shakir? I think that when it comes to this scenario, Buffalo is just a spot where wide receivers I don't have any trust. I think that their defense, I think that the Patriots defense is good enough to kind of not shut down, but really put a damper on what the wide receivers can do. I think this is a tight end heavy game for Buffalo, and I kind of ranked the tight ends this week in Buffalo accordingly to that. So I don't love the upside of Shakir this week. This feels like one of those scenarios I would just go ahead and try to roll out Mike Evans. I really do think I would, because Mike Evans is in a spot where it's probably, it feels basically impossible that he could hit this record in getting 1,000 yards again this year, but they're going to try. They're going to try to do it, and that's why I would ultimately just rather take that opportunity to take the shot. So I would rather take that opportunity for him to get 7 targets in this game over Shakir getting the same 7. So I would personally go with Mike Evans here. Appreciate the super chat, and again, I appreciate you becoming a member here. Once we grow up more the membership over here at FS Roundup, I'm going to start doing a live stream once a week during a game so you guys can watch it with me, maybe even during playoff time. We'll see how much the memberships grow, but you also, as a member, get priority access to get your question answered immediately upon asking. So appreciate you becoming a member over here. Michael Merowitz, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here. 2 running back, 1 wide receiver, and 1 flex. Jacobs, Rico, Woody, Egbuka, Tet, Zay, Hampton, Watson, Wilson. Other league is 1 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. Rico, Woody, Neal, Chris Rodriguez, Ladd, Wilson, Evans, and Watson. Okay. The first one, the 2 running backs. So Josh Jacobs, I heard that he missed practice today. Let's go vet this really quick. Josh Jacobs. So he did miss practice. He's dealing with some more swelling issues. So, I hate it. I hate that so much. Josh Jacobs, we need you as a fantasy community this week. It feels like such a run-heavy game script for them, too. Like, this feels like a game he's got to play in. I hope he plays. That being said, if he's out there, I'm going to play him for sure. But if he's not out there, I think that Hampton is my RB2 either way. Like, Hampton is going to go in. Like I said with the Hampton and Rico discussion, I had this a couple times last night. I would rather play Hampton because I actually feel he's got a better shot at further locking up the RB1 spot this week than Rico does. Because Rico has looked bad the last several weeks, and Chuba looked good. And they're paying Chuba more, so they can justify putting Chuba in at RB1 easier than they can justify playing Rico, who was worse last time they played. So I'd rather play Hampton. And if Jacobs doesn't play, I would go with I'd probably go with Woody over Rico because of the matchup, but it's close. Woody and Rico are very closely ranked. The thing I like about Woody is it doesn't look like Chubb's going to be there this week, so let's check if Woody practiced, because I know he didn't practice yesterday. Let's double check. So he's at practice. Woody's going to play. So if Jacobs was out, I would play Woody and I would play Hampton. And if Jacobs is in, you obviously play Jacobs along with Hampton. One wide receiver, Egbuka, Tet, Watson, and Wilson. To me, it's Tet this week. I think Tet has really become a stabilized force where he's actually kind of been like that all year. Like, his upside is the thing that's increasing. His upside used to be 17 to 20. His upside is 22 plus at this point. So I think his floor has really become stabilized. And with Egbuka, yeah, they probably have similar upside, but I'd rather take the shot on the player I think has the safer floor. They both have good matchups this week, so it's not that matchup is a problem. I'd personally play Ted. And then your flex, that's probably where I would... Man, there's a lot of guys in the same range. Zay, Egbuka, Rico, Christian Watson. Like, those are all guys that are very much in the same range for me. That's tough. They're very close. It's close enough they can all be gut calls. Honestly, the way I'll answer this is when I think about Emeka Egbuka, I think of a guy who has gotten a lot of targets and has not capitalized them recently. Zay, on the other hand, actually gets a relatively stable target share, and is usually good with the ball in his hands. And the matchup, while Egbuka has a great matchup, I would take Zay's over Egbuka. And I feel like I would take Zay's floor over Egbuka's floor. If it was me, I'd probably go with Zay as my flex. So my lineup in that league would be Jacobs and Hampton or Woody and Hampton. My flex, or my wide receiver would be Tet, and my flex would be Zay. That's just me. But again, it's close enough to be gut calls. And then the other league, same type of deal. One running back, two wide receiver. So Rico, Woody, Devin Neal, Chris Rodriguez are the running backs. Again, I'll go with Woody. Woody, to me, feels like the best upside play with also the best matchup. Rico's matchup isn't the best, but it's not the worst. Devin Neal's matchup, not the best, not the worst. Woody's matchup is so plus, and if they do not have Nick Chubb this week, it's going to be so much of Woody Marks. So I'd rather just take that opportunity and play Woody Marks if Chubb was to miss this game. And it looks like everything is kind of pointing to him missing this game. So I'll go ahead and play Woody Marks as the running back there. The wide receivers, I think I would personally go ahead and play Ladd for sure. This second one is so tough. Ladd, to me, is in a tier of his own. I'm not benching Ladd this week. The last week doesn't scare me. He'll be better this week against the Chiefs. The thing that scares me here is Wilson would be ordinarily the play, realistically, but him and Watson, they both have really brutal matchups. Like, I'll just give you an example. If Wilson was playing the Panthers, I would be playing Wilson without even thinking twice. I'd be playing him over Ladd. But people just need to understand how good the Texans defense is. It's so good. So Wilson didn't make it in my top 30 this week, and he didn't move up. I've got Wilson exactly where I had him yesterday. So Wilson has not moved. Watson has not moved because I hate this matchup too. Watson would be a player I'd play right after Wilson. Right after Ladd. Watson, if Watson had the Bears again, and if Wilson had the Panthers, my rankings would go Wilson, Ladd, then Watson, and then Evans. But this week it's so tough. I would play Evans over Wilson. That's what I would personally do. Would I play him over Watson? Honestly, probably. Because while I have liked Watson's floor lately, because he's getting more targets in the middle of the field and short. They're trying to find ways to get him involved in the offense. I don't trust him enough to get a deep ball today. And Evans is the same story. Like, they're the same type of plays. And I trust Evans to get more targets forced his way than I do with Watson this week. So this is one of those rarer scenarios where I would personally play Evans over Watson, but then I would also play Watson at the flex. So that's the way I would personally approach it. I would actually play Rico at the flex. I forgot about the running backs. So Watson's going on the bench. So for me, this lineup looks like Woody at running back, Ladd and Mike Evans as wide receiver, and then I would personally go ahead and play Rico. That's my scenario right there. That's tough though. Like you've got a lot of guys in very close tiers. There's a lot of gut calls, but I'm telling you what my gut is telling me. Appreciate the super chat. Richard Craniums, what is going on? Good to see you in here, man. In the semifinals, first place for my league. Congratulations. Pick one flex, full PPR. Egbuka, Breece Hall, Watson. Defense, Seahawks or Niners this week. CH Hawks. So I'm assuming that's Seahawks. Seahawks so good. Yeah, there's no way I'm benching the Seahawks. No chance. There's no chance I'm benching the Seahawks this week. It is an exact 0% chance if I have the Seahawks, I am benching them this week. 0%. So that's an easy one. Pick one flex, Egbuka, Breece Hall, Watson. Here's another scenario I think I'd go with Egbuka because I think that the way I look at this is Breece is boomer bust. Watson is boomer bust this week. He doesn't have the same floor that he had last week and the week before and the week before that because Denver, it doesn't get much tougher for a wide receiver, and notably, a wide receiver one on his team. He's going to be shadowed all game by Pat Surtain in all likelihood. So I want to stay away from that. And I'm going to go ahead and play Egbuka because his matchup is the best. Breece has a tougher matchup. Watson has a brutal matchup. And while Egbuka is ranked lower than Breece this week, I would personally play Egbuka. So I'll go with Egbuka here because they're all boomer bust players. And to me, it feels like Egbuka has the least likely shot of busting this week. I'll play Egbuka. Appreciate the super chat. J1364, what is going on? 12-team half PPR. 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex. Gibbs, Chuba, Monangai, Walker, Pickens, Evans, Egbuka, Ladd McConkey, T. Higgins, Fannin, Kincaid. So the 2 running backs, Gibbs is going in for sure, and I would also play Kyle Monangai second. Kyle Monangai is a really good play. Like people need to really recognize this. Kyle Monangai is now Ben Johnson's David Montgomery in Chicago. That's what is going on in this Chicago backfield. Kyle Monangai is not a flash in the pan. He's been doing this for too long. He's had too many straight performances where he's been at the front of the line. Like with carries right there with DeAndre Swift. This is a split backfield, but the difference between that backfield and Kenneth Walker's backfield in Seattle is that this is a backfield that actually works with 2 backs. So Monangai and Gibbs are my 2 running backs for sure. Pickens will go in, much to my chagrin. Not because I don't want to play him, just because like we kind of saw the potential of bust in there last week with him. But we have an update with CD, which is that it would appear that CD is about to play. So I do think I'm at a point where if CD plays, I want to play Pickens because I think he's better off with it because not all the attention is drawn his way. So Pickens is going in. I would also say Ladd is going in as well, unless Higgins is T. If Higgins is T, I would play T if he's available. But if it's Jaden Higgins, I'm going to go with Ladd as that second wide receiver because I just know he's the wide receiver one, and last week was a Fugazi. because he played a really good defense. Cooper DeJean is a lockdown slot corner. I mean, Trent McDuffie is good, but I think that they'll find a way to adjust to that. So Ladd would go in for me as well. My flex is going to be between honestly, I think I'd play Chuba over Walker, to be honest. I think I'd go ahead and rule out Walker. Even though Chuba is lower ranked in my rankings this week, I think I would play Chuba. Egbuka, I would play over Chuba, though. I would play, again, if it's T. Higgins, that changes everything. Like T. Higgins, if it's T, I would flex Ladd and just play T. It's very easy. But if it's Jaden Higgins, I'll personally flex Egbuka out of the bunch. To make it clear, I will also put Egbuka in the wide receiver slot because you do not want to have flex players. You do not want to have Thursday night guys in the flex. So I'll put Egbuka in the wide receiver spot. Your tight end, Fannin and Kincaid, they're both good plays this week. The way I look at it is that Kincaid is the better option because of the fact that the weather is not as downright crazy in that game as it is in the Chicago game. I would rather take the quarterback I trust more. I would rather take the conditions in the matchup I trust more, so I would personally play Kincaid. Appreciate the super chat. Kazin, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Suggestions for waiver ads. Algier, Corum, Jones, Wilson, Stevenson. My running backs and wide receivers are Achane, Cook, Harvey, Judkins, Hampton, Chuba, CD, Waddle, Tet, London, and Evans. You've got a pretty stacked group, man. I mean, there's really nothing I can point to and say he's got to go. Honestly, like, I guess, no, I was going to say it would make sense to get a handcuff back. There's really nothing I would make. I really wouldn't make any changes. Like, your roster is not weak. If you had guys like Chamari DK sitting on your bench, or if you had somebody like Tua's obviously not going to be on our bench, but like if you had Juwan Jennings even, I think I'd be able to justify it more and say, yeah, go pick up somebody like Algier or Blake Corum off the waivers. And if Wilson is Michael Wilson, yeah, definitely. But you're not in position to where you have to make any moves. Like this is too strong of a lineup it's too strong of a bench to drop one of them. I think that there are certain teams out there that don't need the wire as much. This is one of them. So I would not make that move. Appreciate the super chat. Kazin again. What up, GOAT? You guys are too kind. Flex Tet, RJ, Fannin, or Hampton. I love RJ Harvey this week. Him and Tet are really close. I'll rule out Fannin and I'll rule out Hampton because RJ Harvey and Tet are both really good plays to me. Let's plug them into the comparison feature and see what the comparison feature thinks. I can tell you it's probably going to be pretty close. Tet and RJ Harvey. Tet is one spot ranked behind RJ Harvey, but the comparison feature likes Tet. Honestly, I might side with the comparison feature, even though RJ is one spot ranked above. I mean, this is what I always say. When it's this close in my rankings, you have to make a gut call because this is my gut speaking to me. RJ, when I ranked them, I liked him a little bit better because I do think we've seen enough from him to know that he's the workhorse back in Denver. And I mean that. Like, workhorse by definition of, 20 opportunities per game. He's on the lower end of that spectrum, but it does also feel like a run game script because Green Bay's defense, I think, will give Bo a lot of trouble. So I do think that there could be a very good game script for RJ Harvey. Man, that's tough. It's so close. I mean, Tet, also the game script favors him as well. They're off a bye week. You know what? I think I'm going to stick with my rankings. I'm going to go against the comparison feature. If it was me, I would flex RJ Harvey. I have more trust in the game plan falling in his direction than I do with Tet. Tet, the last 2 weeks, the one thing that saved him is touchdowns, and that kind of bothers me because they were playing in games that mattered, and they're not used to that in Carolina. The matchup doesn't scare me necessarily, but the situation, it does. That's my gut speaking. And that's why, I have to speak from the gut and from the heart because they're one spot difference in rankings. It is a true gut call. I'm going to stick with my rankings and go with Harvey. Appreciate the super chat. We already answered that one. Adrian, what's good to see you, man? I know I'm on bye week, but I drop Bucks for Bills defense for next week. Bills versus Browns. Was that a smart move? What's your thoughts on Jacobs? You dropped the Bucks defense for the Bills. The Bucks next week are playing the Panthers. So that's a meaningful game right there. Yeah, honestly, things change. I mean, this is why, when I get asked questions in week 11 about week 16, it's I can answer it based on how I feel now, but I can't tell you that it's going to ride like that and stay like that. And that's the perfect example. 6 weeks ago, it would have felt like a great idea to have the Bucks ready to go for the playoffs against the Panthers, but that game means everything. I mean, if the Panthers and the Bucks both win this weekend, that's a divisional showdown because they're tied. So that's for all the marbles basically. So I don't look at them as as strong of a play. And the Bills versus the Browns, that's a game that means nothing to the Browns. And I don't love the Bills defense at all. But, yeah, it does feel like one of those smarter plays. I personally would probably do the same thing. Looking at tomorrow, Adrian, I'll tell you, tomorrow there will be an early defense rankings for next week out on my channel. So stay tuned for that. You'll get confirmation one way or the other. But I personally would just go ahead and play the way you did. I personally like the Bills better right now. My thoughts on Jacobs. Scary for sure. I hope he comes back and is able to play. But missing practice on Thursday is not a good sign. Very rarely do you see a guy miss practice on Thursday out of the blue and then come back and play. It does happen, but just reading the reports that his knee swelled up, he went in for another MRI, not a good sign. So I'm worried for sure. This could be a long-term issue, or it could just be a flash in the pan. Not enough info out there for me to give, I'm not going to tell anyone to drop him, obviously. So, yeah, we're just going to have to play this one by ear. Appreciate the super chat, man. Okay, next up we have M. Kels again. What's going on? Start Fannin over Kelsey with Mahomes at quarterback. That one might make sense to play the stack. I think you were the guy who asked me about this stack. With the Washington stack. And I said, don't do that. Obviously I want to stack, but Washington's is not the one. This one feels like I would probably go ahead and throw my rankings aside because Fannin is considerably higher ranked than Kelsey this week. But I think I would throw my rankings aside and play Kelsey. I probably would because it makes sense for your roster. If you had Harold Fannin and Travis Kelsey with Jackson Dart at quarterback, that wouldn't mean anything, right? That makes it doesn't matter. You don't have any stack upside there. But if you had Shedeur Sanders or Mahomes, in which case you have Mahomes, then it makes sense to go ahead and play Kelsey because you want that stack upside. They're not drastically far ranked enough for me to be you're crazy to do that. So, yeah, I think it makes the most sense. Appreciate the super chat. Sergio Martinez, what's going on? Egbuka, Pitts, Butte, or Hubbard for flex, full PPR. Again, it makes the most sense to play Egbuka. I don't love Egbuka this week. I feel like I've answered a lot of play Egbuka questions tonight. It's just because of upside. Pitts, I just don't trust him enough. I don't trust this Falcons offense enough to be able to consistently hit Pitts every time they target him. So I don't have a lot of trust with Pitts, especially since he's dealing with injury tonight. Maybe he's not as active. So I'll stay away from Pitts because this Atlanta offense to me is a nightmare with Kirk Cousins. Butte, again, it makes – I answered a very similar question earlier. It doesn't make any sense for me to play Butte when they both have the same floor, but Egbuka has about a ceiling that's probably 7 points higher than Butte's. So I'll personally go ahead and play Egbuka over Butte and Pitts. And then Hubbard, there's uncertainty with both Egbuka and Hubbard. I'd rather take the guy I've seen it more often from. And I don't think has a chance to be irrelevant tonight. I think Chuba has a chance to be irrelevant. So I'll play Egbuka. Appreciate the super chat. Brooklyn, what's going on? Brooklyn 21-14. Need three for full PPR. One has to be a running back. Woody, Genti, Henderson, Olave, Egbuka, and J-Mo. The running back is going to be Henderson. Genti has plummeted in my rankings this week for good reason. With the matchup this week and with Kenny Pickett at quarterback, I have zero trust in that situation. And Woody just doesn't feel as good. Woody feels like he probably has a similar-ish ceiling to Travion. I still probably favor Travion ceiling over Egbuka's, though. And also, I think Henderson's floor is basically right there with him. So I'll go with Henderson. And then J-Mo is definitely going in my lineup for sure. Jamison Williams is the easiest pick of the bunch, so he's going in. And then I probably would play Egbuka over Olave again. I just... Oh, man, that one's close. That one is close, though. Olave versus Egbuka. Let's plug this in. Egbuka and Olave. Egbuka's 2 spots behind Olave in my rankings. Do I stick with the rankings or do I go with the upside tonight? I think I am going to stick with my rankings. I'm going to play Olave over Egbuka. I think it makes more logical sense. I think Olave has a higher floor than Egbuka does, and probably a similar-ish ceiling. Maybe a couple points less, but I think his floor is higher. And they both have good matchups. So I think I would play Olave along with J-Mo and along with Henderson. Appreciate the super chat. Michael, again, good to see you. In that first league, left out Brees and could pick up Emmanuel Wilson if Jacobs is out. First of all, that's what you need to do for sure. Like right now, you need to make your first priority move. Go grab Emmanuel Wilson. I still would stick with the same thing in that first one. I'm not playing. Actually, I probably would play Brees over Rico as my flex. Like, here's how it would go. If Jacobs is good, I'd play Jacobs. If he's not good, I'd play Emmanuel Wilson, and I would play Hampton. Then my wide receiver would be Tet, and I would put Zay or Brees. Man, that's close. I think I'd stick with Zay, actually. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with Zay. It's close, but I think that's the move I'm going to make. I'm going to stick with Zay. So, yeah, it doesn't change much. Appreciate the super chat. All right, we're going to try to go through these very quickly. Sean Poopy, what's going on? That's a good name. Who do I start of the following wide receivers? Jordan Addison, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, or Keenan Allen? If it's only one, I'd personally go with Godwin. I would. I think Godwin probably has the safest floor and ceiling combo of the bunch. Mike Evans could get 2 touchdowns tonight, and it wouldn't shock me. But being on a pitch count, that it's his first game back in, 8 weeks or something like that, I'll stray away from him. If it's only one, I'm going with Godwin. In order for me, it goes Godwin, Mike Evans, Keenan, and then Addison. That's how it would go for me personally. Appreciate the super chat. KVN Castro, what's going on? Please help pick 3. I can decide who to start this week between Wilson, Watson, Sutton, Wandale, Evans, and Ladd. Pick 3. So Ladd is definitely going in. Ladd is a no-brainer to me. Then it becomes really murky. I would play Wandale over Wilson, Watson, and Sutton. So Wandale's going to go in. And then this comes down to the same exact concerns I had when I answered Evans versus Watson earlier, and Wilson was in there too. If those two guys had easier matchups, I would play both of them over Watson, or both of them over Evans. But they both have brutal matchups this week. So I'm going to play Evans over Wilson and Watson. Sutton and Evans are really closely ranked. I probably would play Sutton. I would go ahead and play Sutton because you just don't know what to expect from Evans. Mike Evans is the jack in the box of the night. Like he's either going to like burst out of the toy laughing at you and give you like 3 points, or he's going to come out really big and give you 21. I don't trust it. I think the risk reward is not there enough for me with Evans. I'll go with Sutton along with Wandale and Ladd. Appreciate the super chat. Tilt Lock Video. What's going on? Jags or Cowboys defense? Jags, easy one for sure. Jags have the Jets this week. Cowboys, while they have a great matchup against Minnesota, they are not a reliable defense. I would go with the Jags. Appreciate the super chat. Caleb Collier, what's going on? I need a flex. Full PPR. I have Amari and Hampton, Fannin, McLaurin, and Watson. I'll play Hampton over Fannin. I'll play Hampton over Watson. Hampton and McLaurin are close. Let's line them both up. Terry versus Hampton. Hampton is 5 spots behind Terry, and I'll stick with my rankings. I'll go with Terry because I think that his matchup is much better than Hampton's. And I don't think that Hampton is guaranteed to take 100% of the workload this week. I actually think unlikely to take 100%. I'd say he's closer to 70%. But Terry, we know, can get over the top. And Mariota can deliver. So I'll go with Terry, and I'll go with Terry out of this group. Appreciate the super chat. TMG, what's going on? Egbuka or Henderson at the flex? I'll go with Travion. That's a Travion answer. Travion feels a lot more stable, and it feels like they both have the same level of upside this week. So I'll go with Henderson. Appreciate the super chat. Jason LMU, what's going on? Flex PPR, Evans, Godwin, Vele, and DK. I will go with I would go with Evans over Vele and DK, but I'll go with Godwin over Evans. I answered this one earlier. Godwin over Evans feels like a better bet. Appreciate the super chat. Kazan, good to see you again. Start 2 wide receivers if CD is out. Waddle, Tet, and Evans. If CD is out, Tet is in either way. And I would play Waddle over Evans. Waddle has a high enough floor-ceiling combo to match with Evans. And his matchup, I would say, is almost just as good with the Steelers, if not actually a little better. So Waddle and Tet for sure. Appreciate the super chat. Senior 1993. Is Jalen Wright worth grabbing to you? It depends. It depends. If you've got a guy like Chimere DK to drop, yes. It makes a lot of sense. If you have to drop Mike Evans, I wouldn't. If you have to drop Keishon Butte, I probably would. If you have to drop somebody like Bam Knight, I probably would. But if you had to drop somebody like Zay Flowers, I wouldn't. So it's all situational. But if you have Devon Achane, you should be making arrangements to make Jalen Wright available on your roster. So yeah, in most scenarios, if you've got Achane, I would say find a way, unless you're completely stacked. Appreciate the super chat. Kazan again. Flex, Judkins, RJ, or Emmanuel Wilson if Jacobs is out. If Jacobs is out, it's an easy... Actually, it's not easy. But I will go with RJ over Emmanuel Wilson. Because I think that I'm not going to make the same mistake again and rank Emmanuel Wilson super low this week if he plays. Because I was wrong last time, but that was a different matchup. The Broncos are a tougher defense. So I'll go with RJ Harvey if he is out. Appreciate the super chat. Kazin again, drop Goddard or Fannin, my backup tight ends for Kittle. I probably would drop Goddard. I think there's less stability with Goddard, and there's less fluctuation at this point with Fannin. I think Fannin, to me, is a better option. Moving forward, he's been the tight end one in Cleveland, and I think that his ceiling is actually higher than Goddard's, and his floor is too. So I would drop Goddard. Appreciate the super chat. Matthew Johnson, appreciate it. Egbuka or Jennings? I'll go with Egbuka. I just don't think Jennings has the same ceiling as Egbuka. Egbuka, to me, feels like a really big upside play. Appreciate the super chat. Ham Duthala, what's going on? Evans or Egbuka tonight? Again, I'd go with Egbuka because I just think that if I have to narrow things down, right, like Egbuka's targets have been there, and he's not on a snap count tonight. So, like, in theory, if you were scared that Egbuka was going to get benched or be less involved with Evans being back, well, you can kind of count on that not happening this week because Evans is going to be on a pitch count. So I think that Egbuka, just from the opportunity perspective, is a better play than Evans is. I'd go with Egbuka. Appreciate the super chat. Chris Ping, what's going on? My running back 1 is CMC, but what running back 2 would you play? Breece Hall, Amarian Hampton, or Chris Rodriguez? Flex, I could play other running back, or do I trust JJ or Wandale? I have Corum also. My running back 2 would be Hampton this week. Better offense, less volatility, and I think I think they've been missing the explosion out of the backfield with Hampton over the last several weeks, and I think that's the reason they will play him more this week. So I'll go with Hampton as my RB2. Breece is going to be a strong flex. I would play Breece over JJ. I probably would play Breece over Wandale. Yeah, I think I'd play Breece as my flex. Appreciate the super chat. And then the last super chat in here is Adam Furr. What's going on? Pick 2, half PBR. Waddle, Egbuka, McLaurin, and Diggs. Waddle is going to go in for sure. And Egbuka and McLaurin are so closely ranked. Diggs is out. I'm not going to play Diggs when those are my other 2 options. Egbuka and Terry. Comparison feature says Egbuka, 1 spot difference in my rankings. I'm sitting here contemplating this. I think I'd probably go with Terry. It's so close, though. You could see how close they are in my rankings. They're back-to-back. Egbuka is favored by 1 spot, but that is how close they are. So gut call on your part. I am going to be leaning with Terry, though, and go against my own rankings on this one. Appreciate the super chat. I'm going to bang out a couple of these other questions that I'm trying to bang out before the game. Diggs or Evans, I would go with Evans. Kincaid or Pitts, I would go with Kincaid. Diggs, Waddle, Egbuka, McLaurin. Yeah, we just answered that one. Evans, Chuba, or Reed, I would go with Jaden Reed. Diggs or Evans, I would go with Evans. Start Mooney. Very little chance I would do that. Evans or Jaden Reed, I'd go with Jaden Reed. Is Flanoy worth the stash? I think in some situations, yes. If CD plays, though, it's kind of irrelevant. Devonta Smith or Mike Evans, I'd go with Devonta Smith. Evans or Diggs, again, I'd go with Evans. Kincaid or Henry, I'd go with Kincaid. McMillan be irrelevant. I think he'll probably be mostly irrelevant tonight. Start 2, Godwin, BTJ, Shakir. I would personally go with Chris Godwin, and I would go with BTJ. Are you worried that they're going to stop Dart from his typical running volume due to his injury and the fact that they do not have a shot at playoffs. Even looking at last week, he only ran for 20. Not particularly worried because he came out really defiant after that and said, yeah, I'm going to continue to run. So I'm not particularly worried about that, to be honest. And the matchup is great. Kazan, good to see you again. 2 running backs. Stash Chuba, Emmanuel Wilson are right. I have Achane. That makes it tough. I'm going to rule out Chuba because you have an immediate need potentially with Jalen Wright. Did Achane practice today? Let's see. He was limited. I think he'll play. I think Jacobs is more unlikely to play. I would personally go ahead and pick up Emmanuel Wilson right now. Appreciate the super chat. All right, guys, we're up here on Game Time. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's enjoy round 1 commencing tonight of the fantasy playoffs. Love you guys. Let's go win some matchups, and I'll see you after the game tonight. Peace out. Sutton or Mike Evans, I would go with Cortland Sutton.